Russian President Vladimir Putin is in Mongolia this week, where he's paying an official visit. This is despite the country being a member of the International Criminal Court, or the ICC, which has issued an arrest warrant for the Russian leader over war crimes. Putin traveled to Mongolia this week. The visit was officially announced by the Kremlin last week. Mongolia's foreign ministry also announced on its website that Putin will be visiting the country and meeting with the Prime Minister and the Speaker of the Mongolian Parliament. This is Vladimir Putin's first trip to an ICC member country since the International Court issued the arrest warrant for the Russian president last year. The case against him was the forced transfer of children to Russia after Moscow's all-out invasion of Ukraine. Under the Rome Statute governing the court, member countries are obliged to act on an ICC arrest warrant if the subject is on their territory. On Crux Decode, what sort of pressure is on Mongolia to arrest Putin? Is it obliged to do so as a signatory member of the International Criminal Court? Or are there diplomatic exemptions allowed to member states, particularly when the person who is accused is a visiting head of state who has diplomatic immunity and who is also to be treated as a guest of the state? And what are the implications of Mongolia ignoring the ICC order? Moscow has said it was not concerned about the possibility of Putin being arrested in Mongolia. There are no worries. We have great dialogue with our friends from Mongolia, said Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov at a press conference last Friday. He said all the aspects of the visit were carefully prepared. The Ukrainian government, meanwhile, has called on Mongolia to execute the ICC warrant against Putin when he visits the country, in the hope that Mongolia understands that Putin is a war criminal. That was a statement put out by the Ukrainian Foreign Ministry last Friday. They've also called on the Mongolian authorities to execute the mandatory international arrest warrant and hand over Putin to the ICC, something that Mongolia appears loath to do, particularly to a visiting state guest. Putin's visit to Mongolia is his first to an ICC member state since the body issued an arrest warrant. The court alleged that Putin is responsible for war crimes, saying that he failed to stop the unlawful deportation of children from Ukraine to Russia when the conflict began. An ICC spokesperson told the BBC that Mongolian officials had the obligation to abide by ICC regulations, but he also clarified that this did not necessarily mean that an arrest had to take place. Dr. Fadi Al-Abdullah, who's a spokesperson for the ICC, told the BBC that the court states parties, which includes Mongolia, have an obligation to cooperate in accordance with Chapter 9 of the Rome Statute. That is the agreement which was the basis for setting up the International Criminal Court in the first place. The agreement says that in some circumstances, states may be exempt from the obligation to carry out an arrest where they would be forced to breach a treaty obligation with another state. In addition to this, states are also exempt where it would violate diplomatic immunity of a person or a property of a third state. In this case, Vladimir Putin, as the visiting head of a state, does have diplomatic immunity, and it would likely violate bilateral agreements that Mongolia has with Russia. In the case of non-cooperation, ICC judges may make a finding to the effect and inform the Assembly of States parties of the decision that's been taken. It is then for the Assembly to decide whatever measure it deems appropriate to be taken. Meanwhile, Alexander Merezhko, who is the head of the Foreign Relations Committee in the Ukrainian Parliament, has suggested that Ukraine start negotiations with Mongolia to convince it to execute the arrest warrant. If these negotiations do not lead to the desired result, which is Putin's arrest, then you can always turn to the Assembly of Participating States, which should be held at the end of the year. This was according to a message that he put out in a Facebook post. The International Criminal Court, which is based in The Hague in the Netherlands, has 124 members around the world. Both Russia and the United States are not members of the ICC. Mongolia would be defying its international obligations as an ICC member if it allows Russian President Vladimir Putin to visit without arresting him. Welcoming Putin, who is an ICC fugitive, would not only be an affront to many of the victims of Russia's crimes, but also undermine the crucial principle that no one, no matter howsoever powerful, is above the law. This is according to a statement by Maria Elena Vignoni, who is the International Justice Senior Counsel at Human Rights Watch. The international human rights organizations have also framed this as a chance for the Mongolian government to demonstrate its commitment to justice for international crimes and the ICC by denying Putin entry or arresting him if he were to enter the country. The court alleged last year that the Russian president was responsible for war crimes, focusing on the unlawful deportation of children from Ukraine to Russia. It has also issued a warrant for the arrest of Russia's Commissioner for Children's Rights, Maria Lvova-Belova, for the same set of crimes that Putin has been charged with. It said the crimes were committed in Ukraine from the 24th of February 2022, when Russia launched its full-scale invasion. Moscow has previously denied all the allegations and labeled the warrants issued by the ICC as outrageous. The ICC has no powers to arrest any suspects and can only exercise jurisdiction within its member countries. The ICC's arrest warrant for Putin was the first one that it issued against a leader of one of the 5 permanent members of the United Nations Security Council. Putin has avoided traveling to any ICC member state ever since the warrant was issued, which he has deemed as null and void. Last year, Putin cancelled a visit to a summit in South Africa following the ICC warrant for his arrest. That was for the annual BRICS summit, which also included China and India as participants along with Russia. Putin eventually addressed that summit by video conference. As a signatory to the court, South Africa should have detained suspects in its territory, but then President Cyril Ramaphosa at that time had warned Russia would see this as a declaration of war. Ramaphosa said that the decision for the Russian leader to not attend the summit was a mutual one. This time around, Putin's planned visit is at the invitation of Mongolian President Ukhnagin Khurelsukh. Putin is in Mongolia to attend the celebrations of the 85th anniversary of the joint victory of the Soviet and Mongolian forces over the Japanese on the Khalkhin-Gol River during World War II. Allowing Putin's visit would also signal a reversal of Mongolia's support for the ICC. Just a few weeks ago, on the 15th of June, Mongolia had joined a statement by 94 ICC member countries declaring their unwavering support for the ICC in light of growing threats against the court and its officials. In 2023, Mongolia also nominated one of its Supreme Court justices, Justice Erden Balsuren Damdin, to join the ICC bench. He was then elected as the first Mongolian ICC judge. Mongolia has faced the same choice as South Africa did in 2023, but has chosen to overtly flout the ICC. So then the question is, what's in it for Mongolia? Well, for one, Putin has promised Ulaanbaatar cheap access to oil and gas. He's also talked up the trilateral meetings between Russia, Mongolia, and China. He's given interviews to the Mongolian media ahead of his visit. In an interview to a Mongolian newspaper, Onodor, Putin said that Mongolia will be able to use part of the cheap gas that will flow through the country via a pipeline from Russia to China. Mongolia also wants to buy fuel and lubricants from Russia at preferential prices. For Ulaanbaatar, the stakes are high. Mongolia's energy security is deeply tied to its neighbors, which is both Russia and China. Russia, in fact, is the source for 95% of its petroleum products, which account for 35% of all imports in Mongolia. Mongolia's export-led economy, which is driven by raw material like coal, copper, and gold, is highly reliant both on Russian fuel as well as, of course, on Chinese appetite to import these raw materials. As the Russian war in Ukraine rages on, causing death or severe injury to more than 500,000 people so far, both sides are strategically targeting critical energy infrastructure, including oil refineries. The Energy Ministry of Russia reported a ban on fuel exports, including gasoline sales, starting the 1st of March 2024, citing saturation of domestic market. However, Moscow did make some exceptions for a few friendly countries, which includes Mongolia. Now, in the choice that it faces between upholding a global order and its own energy interests, Mongolia has put its money on Putin.